Hi, I'm Noah Johnson, and every once in a while I need a little pick me up, usually through the form of some coffee or maybe an energy drink. And the main active ingredient in both of these is caffeine, and that got me thinking, how exactly does it work? And so, with science fair just around the corner, I decided to ask my teacher, and she recommended a mentor to me for this particular topic. He recommended testing Daphnia magna, which are small, almost microscopic crustaceans that can live just about anywhere. And they're transparent, which would allow me to view the heart rate in particular, and have a very similar nervous system and brain to that of humans. He also recommended 3 different dosages of caffeine to administer to these Daphnia. So 0 milligrams of caffeine, 0.15 milligrams of caffeine per milliliter of solution, and 0.3 milligrams of caffeine per milliliter of solution. Now, before I would conduct this experiment or make a hypothesis, I would need to do some research. And I found out that caffeine is one of the most widely used psychoactive stimulants in the world. And because of this, it has been very heavily researched by scientists and a lot is known about it. Now, I also found out that caffeine tends to increase heart rate in 3 main ways. Number 1 is adenosine receptors, number 2 is the dopamine system, and number 3 is the release of adrenaline. Now, adenosine, the first way is essentially a chemical that tells your body when it's supposed to be tired. It tells you that's why you feel tired, that's why you feel the need to go to sleep or lethargic. It's essentially those adenosine receptors picking up the adenosine and telling your body, well, it's time to go, we're tired, we need to go to bed. And so caffeine shrouds those adenosine receptors, essentially stopping your body from letting itself know it's time to go to sleep, and then therefore you don't feel tired in the morning. Dopamine system. Dopamine is essentially a happy chemical. So whether you accomplish something, maybe experience some sort of love or just eat a ton of chocolate, you will probably experience a dopamine release, and it's that good feeling you feel afterwards. So, for instance, let's say you complete a very hard essay and you're confident with your work, then that sense of accomplishment is caused by the release of dopamine. Now, dopamine is also linked to cardiovascular health and function, particularly when there's a higher amount of dopamine, there is an increased heart rate. Now, adrenaline. You've probably heard of adrenaline, or maybe epinephrine. It's very commonly used in the medical world, and it essentially gets your body going. It causes something called a fight or flight, which is essentially where it dilates your blood vessels, opens up your bronchi, and gets your heart beating faster to allow you to do whatever you need to do to escape or fight. So this also leads to an increased heart rate, as I stated earlier, to pump more blood to the vital organs and keep your body running. Now, there's 2 main receptors that pick up this adrenaline that actually can affect your heart rate. They're beta 1 and beta 2. Now, beta 1 has more of an effect on the dilation of blood vessels and the speed at which your heart beats. And while beta 2 has more of an effect on your lungs and how blood actually influences your organs and such. Now, this allowed me to make a hypothesis that if Daphnia are introduced to these 3 amounts of caffeine, their heart rate will increase as the dosage does, because caffeine will synergize with the dopamine to increase heart rate, as well as causing the release of adrenaline. Now, in order to test this, I would also need a few materials. Microscope slide, caffeine solution, petri dish, Daphnia magna, of course, a notebook, a pencil, a measurement cylinder, and a pipette. Now, I would also use my phone to record the heart rate of the Daphnia, because as you'll see, the heart rates of the Daphnia can go well above 300 beats per minute, which is very difficult to count with the naked eye. Now, first step is to gather the Daphnia and the caffeine solution onto one place, along with the other necessary materials. Then I would set out 3 measurement cylinders and fill each with exactly 10 milliliters of solution and 15 Daphnia. They were all raised in the same place so as to weed out any possible differences in the Daphnia. I would then administer the amount of caffeine decided upon relative to the volume of the habitat water, 10 milliliters again, and I would after waiting 10 minutes for the caffeine to take effect, I would take Daphnia one by one, put them on the slide, and view them for exactly 1 minute on the slow motion setting of my phone's camera. I would then group these recordings, 15, 15, and 15, and go back through and look at all the heart rates and write down how many I counted. Now, after analyzing this data and writing it down and putting it into a spreadsheet, I noticed that when we go to the larger amount of caffeine dosage, the average heart rate increases substantially by about 40 beats per minute. So does the standard deviation by all the way to 20. Now, here is the group with no caffeine exposure, average heart rate of 238.6, standard deviation of 20. The medium group, average heart rate of 234.53 beats per minute, the standard deviation of 15.01, and the 0.3 milligrams per milliliter of caffeine with the average heart rate of 274.33 beats per minute and 33.98 standard deviation. As you can see, much more variation within the data with the higher amount of caffeine introduced, and much less with these two. I also noticed that these two dosages, the smaller two, have very little differences, which could be because of the time I waited for the caffeine to actually take effect. Once again, here's some visuals, graphs. This is the standard deviation for the 0 milligrams, the 0.15 milligrams, and the 0.3 milligrams of caffeine. As you can see, standard deviation is much higher for the larger amount. And average heart rate, 0 milligrams, 0.15 milligrams, and 0.3 milligrams. Once again, the 0.3 milligrams of caffeine has a much higher heart rate. Now, I also think this data could be used in the real world. For instance, mostly in the medical field. For instance, how much caffeine to administer to a certain patient and how much could be dangerous. And also, it could just help us know how much caffeine is actually safe or is unsafe to just ingest on a daily basis. How many energy drinks can we actually have before it becomes unsafe? I also think that if I were to continue this experiment, I saw on some of my sources that ethanol is known to decrease the heart rate of dyspnea, and I would like to see its effect on the heart rate of dyspnea, as well as how caffeine would affect the heart rate of dyspnea that were already introduced to ethanol, and whether it would normalize the heart rate. If I were to do this again, though, there's a few errors I would probably try to fix. For instance, I don't think I waited long enough for the caffeine to take effect, which may have led to which may be the reasoning for the two groups being virtually the same, despite a higher dosage of caffeine in one of the groups. Now, I also did have to raise the dyspnea for about 3 weeks, which was particularly challenging, and I should probably talk to someone who runs an aquarium and has more experience in this field to ensure the raising of healthy dyspnea for this experiment. Overall, my hypothesis was partially proved correct, as I did state that if the dyspnea were introduced to these 3 dosages, their heart rate will increase. However, it appears in the data that there seems to be a certain threshold of caffeine dosage before we see apparent effects of the caffeine on the heart rate of the dyspnea. Now, if I were to do this experiment again, there's also a few errors I could probably fix. For instance, I don't believe I waited long enough for some accurate results. That could possibly change the fact that there would be a threshold and maybe create a more linear graph when it comes to data. I also think that since I did have to raise the dyspnea for about 4 weeks and it was quite a challenge, I think that I should get in touch with someone who possibly runs an aquarium to be able to ensure that my dyspnea are nice and healthy for the experiment. Once again, I'm Noah Johnson, and I tested the effects of caffeine on the heart rate of dyspnea. Thank you for watching.